Today I'm speaking to Professor Alan Dupont, who is the Director of UNSW's new Centre for International Security and Development. Alan, international security has become far more complex in the last 20 or 30 years. What do you think Australia will face in terms of security issues in the next, say, decade?
Well, we're going to face a variety of security challenges, that's pretty clear. Some of them will be very traditional in nature, the standard geopolitical risk, other countries perhaps infringing on our sovereignty, interstate conflicts in the Asia-Pacific region. Those kinds of conflicts are still going to be around in the future. But we're now looking at a greater range of challenges, some of them non-military in nature. They're concerning the resources of the planet, the climate, all these sorts of issues, infectious diseases that weren't regarded as security issues per se, but now are on the security agenda. So the Centre is going to actually look at both these sets or these groups of security challenges and to see to what extent they're going to be problems for Australia in the future and how we should prioritise our responses to them.
So what sort of programs will you be offering our future security experts?
Well, we want to sort of structure the centre so that it reflects these future security challenges and build capacity, analytical capacity in our centre to help people understand the nature of the problems, and also because we're at the policy end of the spectrum in terms of our research, is to also advise and assist governments in devising responses. So the programs that we've chosen for the centre in the start-up phase are a combination of geopolitical challenges as well as what I call non-military or non-traditional security issues. So for example, we will have a couple of countries that will be the focus of our programs, Indonesia being one and India the other. And we'll also be looking at what might happen if we run down the planet's resource base, food, water and energy. If we can't find enough of the things we need to sustain our societies, what are the likely consequences for security? We're going to look at states in transition. We're seeing this being played out in the Middle East at the moment. What happens when countries move from authoritarian governments to democracy? Is it going to be a peaceful, stable process or not? Very likely this is going to be not. So these are the sorts of programs that we want to build the centre around.
Paul Keating once said that there was no country more important to Australia than Indonesia. Is that something that you agree with?
Well, I know Indonesia pretty well. I spent several years of my life working there and I've followed developments for the last 30 years in Indonesia, and I agree entirely with Paul Keating's assessment that from an Australian perspective, Indonesia is actually arguably the most important country to us for a number of reasons. One, because it's our closest neighbour and our biggest neighbour, 250 million people in Indonesia. It's a major trading partner. There are a lot of people who travel between the countries, but it's a country that's neglected. When you think of how important it is in the region and how little coverage we have of it in Australia, how little understanding we have of Indonesia, it's something that I hope in a sort of modest way we can help address in the centre by building capacity around Indonesia and having some very stimulating, interesting programs for our students so that they can understand Indonesia a lot better and build, hopefully, careers around Indonesia in the future.
And you also mentioned India. Why would that be one of the countries that you would focus on as well as Indonesia?
I think India is important for different reasons. One, India is going to be the world's most populous state in the next 20 years, so it matters to everybody. Secondly, it's risen from obscurity, if you like, to becoming one of the major new emerging powers. It's going to challenge China down the track. It's a very complex society, and there are actually some very interesting historical links between India and Australia. So yet again, it's a country that has been neglected in this country. There's very poor understanding of it, but it's going to really matter for us in the future, regardless of which period you look at. So here's an opportunity for the University of New South Wales, I think, to develop a critical mass of experts around a very, very important country. And I think we can do that quite quickly.
I know that a priority for your centre is to create a nurturing environment for the next generation of security experts. What do you think our graduates will need to go on and work in this constantly changing environment?
I think our graduates will need different skill sets to my generation. They're going to have to be able to work across disciplinary spaces. In other words, we need students and analysts who can comfortably move from economics to politics to strategy. And so we need to break down those silos. If you want to understand the challenges of the future, they don't fit neatly into the boxes and the silos we've developed in the 20th century. For example, climate change. Who owns climate change? Well, we've actually set up a Department of Climate Change in government, but the point is that you need to have people with scientific knowledge of science, of climate change. We need to have people who understand the social, political, foreign policy implications if things go badly wrong with our climate. So in the centre, we'd like to develop students who've got a multidisciplinary approach to the subject, who have critical thinking skills, who can work comfortably in government or the NGO sector, journalism, a whole range, and private sector as well, to provide high quality advice for their organisations based on deep knowledge of their subject material. And that may require them to have additional capabilities such as language skills. So you might find, for example, our master's degrees of the future having people with obviously a knowledge of international security, but aligned with language skills or communication skills. You'll be much more of a match and mix of skills to equip them better for the future.
Alan, this is what some people would see as fairly anxiety-inducing stuff. How do you feel as a security expert about our future?
Well, this might surprise you to know that I'm a very optimistic person. I do get out of bed in the morning smiling because I think you have to compartmentalise your work from your personal life. So it's, you know, I actually think though that the world is a better place than the world that I was born into and grew up into as a young person. There is a tendency to always think that things are worse now than they were before, but actually if you look at this objectively, if you look at the statistics about conflict, for example, between states or within states, the number and the intensity of conflicts has diminished dramatically over the last 30 or 40 years. The number of people being killed in wars has plummeted. Now this may seem counterintuitive and surprising to people, but that is a fact. So if you think back to the 20th century, we had two major wars, 20 million people were killed in each war, and numerous medium-sized wars. Now in the 21st century, yes, we've got a lot of conflict, but it's generally low level. Yes, people are being killed, unfortunately, but in far less numbers than before. So that's some of the good news, if you like. It's relative, but it is an improvement. And I think there's now much better cooperation between states everywhere on common security issues. By common security issues, I mean these resource issues. You know, are we going to be able to generate enough food, water and energy for future societies? Is climate change going to be serious? What can we do about it? These are common problems for all states. And therefore we have to cooperate together to solve them, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere. It's not a zero-sum game. So that's why I'm more optimistic now than I was probably 30 or 40 years ago about the prospects for the world being a better place to live in for my children as well.
That's good to hear. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.